Dr. the Honorable Nian Gadsby-Dolly, Minister of Education, Dr. Peter Smith, Chief Education Officer, Ms. Sharon Gomez-Cooper, Assistant Commissioner of Police Criminal Division, Ms. Joy Griffith, Director of School Supervision, Mr. Corey Belfon, Director, Information and Communication Technology Division, Mrs. Avenel Fortune Johnson, Director of the Education Technology Unit, Mr. Wayne Cupid, Director, Education Facilities Planning and Procurement Unit, members of the media, members of the viewing audience on TTT and CNC3, as well as the Ministry's Facebook page. Good morning. My name is Rodal Philip Simmons. I am the Manager of Corporate Communications at the Ministry of Education. Thank you for joining us this morning for the press conference, where the Honourable Minister, along with the senior executives present, will provide an update on operations at our nation's schools. We also have, as I would have indicated before, a special guest, Mrs. Sharon Gomez-Cooper, Assistant Commissioner of Police, who will speak on the work of the technical team of the school violence in collaboration with MOE and the TTPS. We will start this morning's press conference with an opening statement from Dr. the Honorable Nian Gadsby-Dolly, followed by statements from Dr. Peter Smith, Chief Education Officer, who will address the subjects of school discipline and COVID figures in our schools. Mrs. Sharon Gomez-Cooper will speak to an update on the work of the technical team. We will then go to Ms. Joy Griffith, who will give an update on school attendance. The Director of ICT, Mr. Corey Belfon, will speak to the digital transformation initiatives of the Ministry of Education. And then we go to Mrs. Avenel Fortune Johnson, one of our newest directors, and she is of the EdTech unit, and she will speak of the work of the EdTech unit. I now hand you over to the Honourable Minister. Minister.
Thank you so much, and welcome to our viewers, listeners, and members of the media. This press conference has been called to update the public on the operations of schools in Term 3, 2021-2022. As we all know, our schools were closed since March 2020, and we operated on a rotational schedule from February 2021, and on April 19, 2022, that represented the full physical return to school for all students at all levels of the education system. This education system in Trinidad and Tobago consists of 208 ECCE centers, 476 primary schools, 12 special schools, 134 secondary schools, 9 tertiary institutions. And that gives us a grand total of 842 public institutions. These institutions provide an educational opportunity for over 250,000 students. Last week marked 6 weeks since the full physical return to schools, and this press conference seeks to provide information with respect to student and teacher attendance, COVID-19 management, school discipline, and the status of our digital transformation agenda. The Ministry of Education meets regularly with our stakeholders who provide feedback and important recommendations for all areas of school operations. And these meetings also allow us to give them feedback. But the Ministry of Education is cognizant of the fact that there was, and there may still be, a high level of angst with respect to operations of schools during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so we consider it important in this context to provide information today to the general public. The Ministry of Education's team has also been visiting 10 to 15 schools fortnightly in all areas of the country to ascertain the realities of school operations, including their challenges and their successes. These visits will continue as a regular component of the work of the Ministry of Education. So we have visited about 100 schools so far, and therefore we only have 742 to go. At this time, I would like to allow the staff of the Ministry of Education to give their contributions. We will have first our Director of School Supervision, Ms. Joy Griffith, giving information about the attendance in schools. That will be followed by our Chief Education Officer, Dr. Peter Smith, who will speak to COVID-19 management in schools and also our school discipline. Then we will have the Assistant Commissioner of Police, who we are so happy to have join us, Mrs. Sharon Gomez-Cooper, speak of the TTPS's initiatives in collaboration with the Ministry of Education at our schools. Then we will have our digital transformation projects elucidated by our ICT manager, Mr. Corey Belfon, and that will be followed by our newest director, Ms. Avidel Fortuna Johnson, who will speak to us specifically about our school learning management system and the building out of this system as we move along. And that will wrap up our press conference, and then we'll just have a summary at the end, and we'll open for questions. So at this time, I'd like to invite our Director of School Supervision to report to us.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Good morning, everyone. The physical reopening of all schools in Term 3 marked the mandatory return to the physical classroom of all students in the ECCE, primary and secondary schools. Teachers, staff, and students reported to their respective schools for teaching and learning. Deans, heads of departments, senior teachers, and administration ensured that attendance data was taken by form teachers, class teachers, and subject teachers for each scheduled class. Starting with the youngest, there was an average of 75% of students at ECCE centers for Term 3, with their teachers recording a turnout of 98%. Pre-COVID figures were averaging 99% for ECCE teachers and 96% for students. During the lockdown, there was an average teacher attendance of 99% and students of 67% at that level. With respect to student attendance at the primary level for this term, for first year to Standard 4, the average attendance of students is 67.36%. The average attendance for Standard 5 students who are awaiting SCA 2022 results is 29.34%. Standard 4 students, on the other hand, is averaging at 70.93%. The average attendance at government primary schools is slightly higher than that of the denominational schools at the primary level for this period. At the government primary schools, the average attendance is 68.03%, as opposed to the denominational schools with 67.45%. A glance at the average attendance figures at the primary level from pre-COVID to present would show that pre-COVID attendance was 76.59%. During the lockdown period, it was 76.04%, and now with the return to physical classes, Term 3, the average is 67.36%. With respect to teacher attendance for the same period at the primary level, the average attendance is 89.96%, which is higher than that of the students' attendance, 67.36%. Pre-COVID figures were averaging 84.64% for primary school teachers and 76.59% for students. During the lockdown, there was an average teacher attendance of 97.67% and students of 76.04%. Now for secondary schools. For students of forms 1 to 4, the average turnout is 70.2%. The student attendance at the denominational secondary schools is notably higher than that of the government secondary schools at the secondary level for the same period. At the denominational secondary schools, the data is averaging at 79.69%, as opposed to the government secondary schools at 66.57%. The average attendance figures at the secondary level from pre-COVID to present would show that the pre-COVID attendance was 70.99%. During the lockdown period, the average was 59.36%, and now Term 3, with the full reopening of physical schools, classes, is at 70.2%. Forms 4, the students at Forms 5 and 6 are presently writing their CXC 2022 examinations. With respect to teacher attendance for this period at the secondary level, the average attendance is 78.12%, which is higher than the average student attendance of 70.2%. Pre-COVID figures were averaging at 82.24% for secondary school teachers and 70.99% for students. And during the lockdown, there was an average teacher attendance of 93.20% and students of 59.36%. Teachers continue to monitor students' attendance and follow up on irregular attendance and absenteeism with parent conferencing and referral to SSSD for their intervention as required. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. The Ministry of Education views school health and safety as a primary concern and is prepared to continue to do so by taking necessary steps to reduce the potential spread of COVID-19 in the nation's schools. The Education District Health Services Unit was specially created in January 2021 by the Ministry of Education for continued monitoring and reporting. The EDHSU comprises a total of 18 district nurses who facilitate the management of COVID-19 cases occurring in schools. The unit is operational in each educational district. In the guidelines for the physical reopening of schools, phases 1 to 4, the Ministry of Education has outlined a phased approach to the safe return of students to the physical classroom. The ministry has prepared a detailed COVID-19 case management guide, which provides more specific details about the procedure for managing both suspected and positive cases of COVID-19 in schools. The Ministry of Education continues to collaborate with the Ministry of Health. On May 16th, both ministries met to discuss, among other things, 1, variable quarantine times and quarantine orders for households, and response time in securing results. The ministries agreed to continue the collaboration, and the MOE continues to provide weekly statistics to the Ministry of Health on COVID-19 cases. The EDHSU unit, in collaboration with the Teacher Education Performance and Professional Development Division, has also embarked on a district-wide sensitization and reinforcement of the COVID management cases for principals and administrators through its webinar series. This is to ensure that principals and administrators are kept updated with the best practices to mitigate against the spread of COVID-19 among students. Thus far, 521 attendees from ECCE, primary and secondary schools were exposed to the COVID-19 management training. The number of positive COVID-19 cases for schools, including staff and students, since April 19 return to physical schools is as follows. Week 1, 58. Week 2, 288. Week 3, 306. Week 4, 328. Week 5, 233. And week 6, 172. I now move on to school discipline. School indiscipline and violence presents a serious challenge in less than 5% of the 820 public schools. Nevertheless, The specter of adolescents engaged in fights broadcast over traditional and social media is a concern to all of us. Of equal concern is the psychological effect on the student of the school, their parents and teachers, and the culture of the school. The multidisciplinary technical team convened by the Honorable Minister of Education in April 2022 recently submitted the draft National School Discipline Matrix, which addresses 3 areas. 1, the discipline matrix with the infractions and the attendant consequences. In that document, 3 levels of students' infractions were identified: minor, example, dress code; major, example, disorderly or disruptive conduct; and severe, example, fights, sexual harassment. Consequences occur at 3 levels: first, second, and third offenses. Examples of consequences include detention, parent conferences, in and out of school suspension, extended suspension. We are also looking at the development of a demerit points-based system. Secondly, identification of positive behavior strategies. Preventative strategies, example, emotional intelligence, parenting in education, peer counseling, prefect system, student support. Developing reinforcement strategies, example, a complaints system, rewards, guest speakers. Thirdly, criteria for schools which would qualify for greater attention. Approximately 19 criteria were identified, including areas such as the incidence of fights, suspension, absenteeism, student feedback on the school climate and culture survey, and the environment in which schools are located. The draft document will be forwarded to stakeholders for their review and feedback. In Term 3, 2021-2022, the Ministry of Education continues to monitor and address issues of student indiscipline and violence. Emerging trends and pre-COVID-19 proxy data, we're looking at Term 2, 2018-2019, indicate the following patterns. 1, the most common infractions occurred at Forms 2 with 25% and Forms 3 with 23% in 2018-2019. In comparison to Form 1 with 27% and Form 2 also with 27% in 2022. Fights with or without weapons, possession, use of tobacco, vaping products, disrespect, defiance of authority, use of drugs, sexual misconduct are among the most commonly reported infractions for both 2018-19 and 2021-2022. Similar trends are observed in terms of when the infractions occur. Lunchtime in 2018-2019, we saw 19%. In 2021-2022, 34%. During class time, 2018-2019, 34%. 2021-2022, 19%. After school, 2018-2019, 20%. 2021-2022, 13%. Break time, 2018, 2019, 8%, 2021, 2022, 11%. Generally, more males, 70%, than females receive suspension notices for both year periods under review. At this time, the ministry has seen a decrease in the number of suspensions and serious fights. The ministry will continue to implement measures to reduce levels of indiscipline and violence in our schools. As such, a meeting has been carded for June 9th with the principals of schools that face challenges. Provision for resources in terms of the following would be made: safety officers, full or increased complement of security officers, dedicated, not shared, guidance counselor, school social worker, and special education instructor. Ongoing training of principals and teachers in curriculum delivery, conflict resolution, and remedial teaching. Parent support groups, peer mediation training for students, life skill sessions for students, upgraded facilities for TVET, VAPA, and sports, and finally, police assignments and posts. Thank you very much.
Good morning. First of all, yes, good morning again. So I will speak on behalf of the TTPS, and what I have to say is that I am pleased that the Ministry of Education and, well, the Minister of Education herself reached out to the Commissioner of Police. So we came on board to see in what way we as the TTPS could partner with the Ministry of Education. So what we recognize is that because of the children's violent behavior at the schools, we saw that there was a need to definitely partner with the Ministry of Education. So one of the programs that we implemented was going into the schools. We went into the schools, our liaison officers went into the schools, and we have been communicating with the principals, the safety officers, the deans, the guidance officers, likewise the MTS personnel, as to the issues that they are encountering or would encounter, and to also speak with our children at the schools that were identified by the Ministry of Education. So our partnership, based on our partnership, what the Commissioner has also established, we have patrols during the peak hours during the course of the morning before school starts. The police, they are there at the schools that were identified. They are there, they would be stationary for a while, and then they would go into the schools, drive around, make sure everything is okay, speak with the liaison officer. If there's need to speak with anyone else, they would come back out, and on evenings, they would also pay attention to those said schools. So as Dr. Smith said, recognize that the violence in the schools are down to almost zero. So we are pleased that our presence at the schools, in and around the schools, have done some benefit for our children. Concerning the conjunction or the collaboration, I should say, with the Ministry of Education, our intention is that at the reopening of the schools, to use our officers from the Special Victims Department to have lectures at the schools that the ministry would identify. And we want to look at all schools basically, so For instance, the children who are transitioning from the primary to secondary schools, and likewise the children at the secondary schools, we want to continue to lecture to them as the term goes by. So we want to ensure that the children from the primary to the secondary schools, there would be a smooth transition for them, because they may not be able to handle that particular environment. So we as police officers, we need to get to them, have a conversation with them, a one-on-one conversation, to ensure that their life from primary to secondary would be a smooth transition. And the TTPS purpose really is to bring back that, that law and order within our school environment. And we are willing and we are ready. And as the commissioner would say, right, we are all on board. We are here to partner with all our stakeholders, our NGOs, and we are even offering services at our police youth clubs where we would, bring them on board. So as we continue to collaborate with the Minister of Education, right, we will continue to have that discussion to see where the police could be utilized. Thank you.
Good morning, all. To speak of the digital transformation of the Ministry of Education and the education sector is to present an iterative journey with a multitude of platforms that resolve many of the challenges present today, with incredible ideas to counter those yet to come. These ideas have been conceptualized with stakeholder input and have been, in some cases, already implemented, with many more solutions on the way. The digital transformation of the Ministry of Education focuses on our corporate landscape as well as the education sector. Our focus ensures 1, improved accessibility and access, 2, personalized learning approaches, 3, cloud-based learning opportunities, 4, smart devices and integration, 5, security across digital devices and platforms, 6, digital citizenship, 7, analytics and business intelligence, 8, enterprise-grade network infrastructure, 9, devices and connectivity, and last but not least, 10, a magical digitally connected journey for every student from registration to graduation using online platforms for student management, and of course this encompasses applications to schools, registration, transfers, examination results, access to school-based services via QR code identification cards, e-testing, e-books, literacy and numeracy platforms, self-paced development, and STEM, which as we know is an approach to learning utilizing science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as access points for guiding and developing student inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking. The end game of this journey provides the Ministry of Education with the capability to analyze student performance over time, nationally, thereby enhancing the analytical foresight of the Ministry of Education to address trends in education or in making education sector-wide decisions. Some of our completed and in-progress initiatives are: 1, the wireless expansion at 134 secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago at a budgeted cost of $7.3 million TT. And this will result in an upgraded network infrastructure which hardens the security posture of schools with the implementation of enterprise-grade networks to facilitate e-testing and other services. To date, 39 schools have been completed, and we do have a June 2022 project completion date. 2, a connectivity drive, which is a collaboration with UNICEF. Phase 1 consisted of 14 schools. 2 were selected from each educational district, and this would have included the installation of access points, security gateways, and switches. And of course, this allows schools to also act as secured internet access hubs within their communities. All Phase 1 schools, the cabling and network infrastructure has been completed, and we have selected an additional 14 schools for which site visits are ongoing, and Phase 1 schools will go live by July 2022. 3, a collaboration with UNICEF and the ITU, which is called the GIGA project, with connectivity upgrades incoming to primary and secondary schools. And the Ministry of Education has recently entered into this collaboration, and we are working out the details of the assistance which will be rendered. 4, the TT Wi-Fi initiative, which is a collaboration with the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and the Ministry of Public Administration, whereby 74 schools have been offered and installed secured, dedicated internet connectivity and wireless access in administrative offices, libraries, and computer laboratories, right? And 66 have been completed, and 8 are awaiting TSDT's input to be completed. 5, in 2021, the Ministry of Education would have delivered 10,000 devices for students in collaboration with TAT, plus an additional 13,000 devices from corporate donors, which makes for a total of 23,000 devices. 6, government procured laptop devices for students and teachers in 2021, totaled 20,000 devices, which have all been delivered. 7, MiFi devices for students and teachers, which was also done in 2021, 10,000 devices were also delivered. In 2022, the Ministry of Education is once again providing laptop devices for students. 7,000 devices are on order, and we are awaiting delivery for these devices in July 2022. The means test for student allocation is also completed. 9, the SEA online portal. This will deal with the retrieval of SEA results online, which is in itself a digital first for Trinidad and Tobago, and this is set to be implemented for SEA results in 2022. Online teacher registration. Hassle-free online registration for prospective teachers has already been designed. We are currently undergoing last checks with the Teaching Service Commission, and there's a projected launch in July 2022. A student management system is currently being piloted in 70 schools with the aim at digital attendance being taken and digitized school records. 12, our employee portal, e-portal, job letters and payslips have already been implemented, and TD4s are to be made accessible. 13, a document management system. This will allow the digitization of human resources employee files using IRIS, which is the Integrated HR Information System, is currently ongoing. 14, enhanced IRIS usage, which includes position number rationalization and assignment, along with streamlined queries for quicker turnaround times for increments and employee or teacher requests relative to leave, appraisals, and benefits. 15, the piloting of IFMIS, which is the Integrated Financial Management Information System, in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, which will help to improve the recording, accuracy, and timeliness of all fiscal reporting to offer increased oversight, predictability, access, transparency, accountability, and on-site reporting of the financial operations of the Ministry of Education. 16, we have embarked upon the redesign of the MOE corporate website with a launch carded for June 2022. And of course, this will be more user-friendly with greater access to information and services. 17, the dedicated management of social media platforms to provide answers to queries, which includes the communications personnel as well as an online chatbot. The shift towards a digital modern world has had a measurable impact on the inner workings of the Ministry of Education. This, from myself and the Ministry of Education, has been some insight into the work of the honorable ministers, the executive team, as well as the talented and dedicated members of the ICT division, along with collaborating units such as the Education Technology Unit and other units of the Ministry of Education. As we step into the future, there will be access for all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The Educational Technology Unit, or EdTech Unit as it is referred to, is better? All right. So I'll begin again. The Educational Technology Unit, or EdTech Unit as it is referred to, is the newest department formed at the Ministry of Education and plays a key role in the Ministry of Education's thrust to not only establish but also to sustain an e-learning ecosystem through which teaching and learning will be optimized. The COVID-19 experience has taught us that we must build educational resilience into the education sector. The development of the Student Learning Management System, SLMS, does this, as teachers will not only have their physical classroom, but a virtual classroom or e-classroom as the repository of educational material and activity. This will allow seamless transitions between physical and virtual modes of teaching if this becomes necessary. Underpinning the digital transformation also is the understanding that students who currently sit in the classrooms at the ECCE, primary and secondary levels not only learn at a different pace, but will graduate into a world that promises to be rapidly evolving and highly digitized. Therefore, in keeping with its mandate to transform the education sector, the Ministry of Education must strive to ensure that mechanisms and systems are put in place to equip students with the competencies required to thrive in such a space. The Student Learning Management System, or SLMS, one of the suite of projects under the Digital Transformation Program, provides unique opportunities for achieving this. It facilitates enhancement of teacher-directed learning in the formal classroom environment and provides opportunities for self-paced or parent-guided learning. Thus, the SLMS has the potential to produce high-quality learning experiences, augment student achievement, and promote educational resilience. The upgraded SLMS is being built to offer effective and efficient administration, management of assessment, provision of on-time and real-time support and reports to teachers and students. While the SLMS provides such opportunities, we are only going to reap the benefits associated with strategic and ethical use of the platform if Ministry of Education personnel become better positioned to leverage all that it offers. One of the core functions of the EdTech unit is, therefore, to provide the technical support and guidance Ministry of Education personnel, including teachers and parents, need to enable them to become better poised to use the SLMS to produce and provide enriched learning experiences for students. At present, we are in the process of optimizing the current SLMS with a view to moving into phased onboarding of schools and ultimately into having an e-classroom created for all teachers and students. The staff of the unit started working in March 2022. And though the full staff complement is not yet on board, the course shells for teachers from 14 schools have been completed and work continues apace. This represents over 7,000 students and 120 teachers. Concurrent with the SLMS course creation is the digitalization of the school records to facilitate upload of students. These two projects are intertwined as one is required to complete the other. The goal is to increase the number of citizens with the digital competencies required to navigate successfully this current context and future social context. Thank you.
I hope that the information that was presented was useful. We have heard from our Director of School Supervision, our TTPS liaison, Assistant Commissioner of Police, Ms. Sharon Gomez Cooper. We've heard from our Chief Education Officer, our Director of ICT, as well as our Director of Educational Technology. And we have updated on what is happening at the Ministry of Education with respect to operations of Term 3, 2021-22. I'd like to indicate that we have, as next steps, some very important meetings coming up. Some of them may have been mentioned. We meet with Tutor to discuss virtual teaching and our digital transformation initiatives, as of course these would mean that there are different operational procedures that we are seeking to implement, and we must have our recognized majority union on board. We meet with the Ministry of Education executives. We meet with the selected school principals, as our CEO indicated, on June the 9th, to discuss schools that require the most support and the resources that we can provide, and to hear from them their feedback on how we are able to support them the best way. We are meeting very soon with the TTPS to discuss some of the initiatives that are to be implemented in schools, digital initiatives that would include, interaction with our students to benefit them in the best ways. And we meet very soon with our wider stakeholder body. We send them the draft school discipline matrix today. And so we shall meet with them very soon to discuss their comments and their feedback to that school discipline matrix, because, of course, we want them on board in terms of their suggestions, their recommendations, so that when this is implemented, it has everyone's buy-in. I'd also like to indicate that the Cabinet just yesterday approved that the MOE through iGovTT, who has been our partner in all our digital initiatives, can proceed to procure the services of the selected provider for an ebook platform and an online numeracy initiative. What this does is allow us now to enter into that space where our resources for our students will be digital on that ebook platform, and so we are definitely looking forward to linking that with our SLMS, and so we're providing an all-round digital experience for our students. So that is now in the making. Now we have Cabinet's approval, having gone through the RFP and procurement process, and the online numeracy solution that will be targeting 18,000 students at selected primary and secondary schools, and allowing them to have that adaptive learning experience where their teachers can assign work. The work the students do will be self-corrected. It will indicate areas of weakness and give the students practice in those areas. So this type of adaptive learning experience is what we want to offer to address, most importantly, the learning loss that we have seen based on our diagnostics that have been performed by teachers that operate in some of our schools. So we are looking forward to the implementation of our ebooks. We are looking forward to the implementation of our online numeracy platform as we move forward. So I want to thank the media, and now we revert to our communications manager.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we now move to the segment of this morning's press conference, or actually this afternoon's press conference now, where we take your questions. I ask you, however, to please state your name and the media house each time you ask your question. There are officers on the floor who will provide you with a mic so that we have proper audio. Can we have our first question?
Good morning, everyone. Rihanna McKenzie here from Newsday. So we're talking about the online learning system and digital transformation, which has been a priority for the ministry for some time. And so now with this new system and the implementation of the EdTech unit, is there an end goal or a date in sight that we can see this accessible to all schools in the nation?
Right. So as mentioned in what was shared with you prior, we are looking at phased implementation with the first phase of schools hopefully being able to pilot their experience up until July 2022, which is the close of this term, with a hopeful move towards having all schools on by September 2022.
And
I think it's afternoon.
Sorry,
Good
let me just
afternoon.
add to that, that one of the pivotal and fundamental bits of information that we must have is digital school records. That does not exist presently at all schools. So we need to have the students' birth pins, we need to have that linked with their Emory-provided email addresses and so on to allow them to log in. So two projects are going on simultaneously. The building of the SLMS, the Learning Management System, as well as the digitization of school records. We are actually discussing at this point the procurement of a data entry company to assist schools in entering that data, because that has been, and I'm sure Corey can tell you, has been here even before my tenure, that has been one of the sticking points, being able to transfer the data that is formally on the cumulative card of a student into a digital format. And so that is one of the main things that will assist us in getting all schools onto the school learning management system. So that's why it needs to be a phased basis. And as we run the two projects, we intend to get schools on. So by the end of July, we should have at least 28. By the end of September, we are hoping to have at least 70, and we move forward in phases. It will be easier as we go along because schools will be getting in their information on the digitized system all along.
Good afternoon, Urvashi from TV6. Now, Minister, yesterday one of our colleagues attempted to ask you this very question, and you, of course, reserved today for that. So I'll just jump straight in. We're talking about school discipline, school violence, and of course, reports across the newspapers about a student in Tobago threatening to return to that school with a gun. And we know that school violence, particularly shootings, is not foreign to schools across the world, and it's not foreign here. I just reflect on the 2002 incident at an international school when a 17-year-old student attempted to shoot that school, and he was in fact shot dead by police. Given that is not foreign to our environment, Minister, what immediate steps has been taken given the concerns of the general public and parents?
But I think the presence of the police here speaks exactly to what immediate steps have been taken, and not now, even before now, as we noticed the violence increasing in our schools. School violence is not a new thing. Unfortunately, what has been happening abroad, when you're seeing all of those mass shootings, as we say in local parlance, we have to pinch ourselves. And that is why we have instituted this formal partnership with the TTPS. So it's no longer just an informal thing. We have written, we have correspondence, and now we are fully partnering with the police. And what you have noticed is, as the Assistant Commissioner would have said, there are patrols in the high peak times for violence. So the officers are at the school in the morning, they're there in the lunchtime. When the principal needs to call on them, they can call on them. And we've been visiting schools and speaking to principals and getting their actual feedback about how the police have been interacting. And what is also important is that many of the police officers who are in the schools are part of the community police program, and they are the ones who run the police youth clubs. So they're accustomed interacting with young people. They're accustomed, encouraging them and inspiring them. So we are not only looking at having the actual physical presence of the police there to thwart the violence. We also have the police on call whenever it is necessary. In addition to that, the police are now extending their reach into not just stopping violence, but encouraging positive behavior. So all of those are the things that already have been implemented. And we now have the school discipline matrix. We have that draft. It's going to our stakeholders, and that does a lot and speaks a lot to what else can be implemented to encourage positive behavior. What's the signage in the school? Training teachers to encourage positive behavior, how they speak to the children, how they encourage them to do things that are right. So that document has a slew of initiatives to be implemented at the schools, and so we are anxiously awaiting our stakeholder feedback from that once they get our document, so that we can have not just the punitive presence. That's not what we want. We want to encourage positive behavior.
Minister, you did say there are regular patrols at certain times at certain schools, and of course, the TTPS will be on call, but it had been contemplated before to have police posted, I believe, at 14 schools. Where's that thought process as having police at these permanently posted at these high-risk schools, one? And if I may ask...
Let me answer that first. The police, in discussion with the police, we have modified the approach so that they are not posted at the school, because what has been noticed in some cases before, when police become posted at the school, it presents a bit of a problem in terms of, one, accommodation for the police, two, a lot of things just suddenly now the responsibility of the police. The police become almost like the guards at the school. So in order to maintain that distance between the school and the police service, what has been augmented is regular patrols at the schools and the on-call availability of the police at schools, the police lectures and so on. So the police presence is heavy at the schools, but they are not actually posted there. And that has been the modification in the schools that require our regular support. We are not calling them the high-risk schools.
Thank you, Minister, for that correction. The bags and persons are students searched before they enter schools? I mean, I just refer back to the threat of that student saying that he would bring a gun to school.
In some schools, yes.
Can you say which schools and why, and how is that done? Is it done by the MTS guards?
It's done by the MTS guards. I don't have a list of the schools, but it's done by the guards in schools where it has become necessary to do that.
Yes, my next question, the government announced yesterday, of course, cuts to the University of the West Indies. My question is, how will these cuts affect the bursaries, if at all? Does this mean that changes to those contributions will have to be made? Also, what about contributions to UTT? How will they be affected, and how does the government contribute to them?
Across the board, the tertiary level institutions have been experiencing reduction in subventions. As the ministry, as the government has reduced expenditure, that has been transferred to all of the tertiary level institutions to which the ministry gives subventions. So that would cover the question about UTT, MIC, NSC, all of them. So they have all been asked to look at their operations, look at their recurrent expenditure, cut waste where possible, and that is the same thing that is being extended to the UE at this point in time. The reduction in subvention actually took place in 2021-22, and so what we are intending to do is maintain that subvention as we move forward to 2022-23, but also asking the university to take an inward look and do that kind of cutting. The university has been responding well over the years to our pleas to do that, and so we expect that in collaboration they will be able to reduce their expenditure so that what the government can afford to give at this time, which would be in the vicinity of $466 million for the year, would be sufficient. That does not have any effect on the bursaries.
Right, can we take a question from this side? Go ahead.
Hi, morning, Minister. Rashad Khan, Guardian Media Limited. Okay, so my first question to you is, now I remember back when the school had just reopened and the police were now posted at these schools, there was some mention of an interministerial committee putting forth some recommendations. Now, I'm not sure if that's the discipline matrix that the CEO might have mentioned, or if I'm conflating the two, but regardless, I'm wondering, is there any possibility that we may be able to get our eyes on the recommendations that are being put forth?
those are the recommendations from the committee that were mentioned, and I would prefer that the stakeholders have a look at it here. The document is not complete without our stakeholder recommendations. So I wouldn't want to put that out there without giving our stakeholders the time to take a look at it and to augment that document.
Okay, and my second question, I just want to say thank you for the breakdown in COVID-19 cases in the schools by weeks, but I was wondering, is there any further breakdown that we can get, preferably by the education level? How many exactly are students? Where are we seeing the most cases coming from?
The only reason we presented it here is because it's data that the Ministry of Health has had access to. And when they give their breakdown, we provide them with that type of information. And so I know that they would be sharing in different districts and so on. So that's already been done and supplied.
Not all has been done. I think only the first 2 times that the Ministry of Health gave out the breakdown, they gave it out by districts. But what I'm asking specifically for is by education level.
No, we collect it on the basis of, and we give it to the Ministry of Health on the basis of by district and the total numbers, and that's what we are providing.
Okay, and my final question on this, because I want to give my colleague here a chance to ask a question as well. There was mentioned that there were only 18 district nurses throughout the country to manage these cases. Does the Ministry of Education feel that's sufficient, or do you all intend to get more?
Well, we actually started with 14, so 18 is an augmentation, and we do have a couple of vacancies for some more. But the specific role of these nurses, they're not school nurses. They're not assigned to a particular school. They're assigned to the district, they liaise with the principals, and they are the interface between the Ministry of Education's principals and the Ministry of Health. So they do not attend to a particular case at a school. They ensure that when a principal has a case, they can contact the nurse, ensure that all the procedures are being followed, and if there's any backlog at the Ministry of Health, they can reach in there to the CMO office and ensure that all the processes are happening smoothly. So at this point in time, based on our numbers, you would see, and our nurses have been working very hard, and they've also offered training to the principals to ensure that the management of cases is robust, and we have seen thus far that their work has been bearing fruit.
Yeah, hi, Minister. Sonal Lala, TTT News. I know you would have spoken about the e-learning platform that's due to come on in July, September, and so on. And there's been a concern, about students who may have been in quarantine and so on. Would this assist somewhat in the learning loss that they have been affected by?
Yes, it actually would, and this is the resilience that we have to build into our system, having never contemplated before that schools would not be available, physical school. So it will allow a teacher to load all of her educational material onto any classroom, accessible from anywhere, and it's very much like what schools have been doing in emergency setting. This will really formalize it and allow all schools to have access to the same level of e-classroom platform. And so the teacher can load her work there, they can do online testing there, in different ways, have quizzes, load their videos and so on. It's a very interesting and important platform, and that's why our tertiary level institutions are able to seamlessly go through the pandemic, because most of them had their e-classrooms already set up. So it will allow for students, if this COVID situation persists and there's quarantine, it will allow students to be able to access the classroom virtually, yes.
Just secondly from me, from the CEO, I know you would have spoken about a demerit point system. I'm not sure if you can delve a little bit into that. I know it's just a proposal at this time, but any information you can give us with regards to that?
Okay, so thank you for the question. Basically what it looks at is, in some instances, rewarding students for positive behavior, and in other instances, they are given demerit points for unacceptable behaviors. Okay, and that's basically the gist of it at this point in time.
Just to add that in many schools right now, that type of point system exists. I remember when I was a student at SAGS, we had commendation and order marks. And so you were 3 times late, you got an order mark, and so you did your best not to get an order mark, and that kept you in line and disciplined. So it's the same type of system. It's not a new thing. It's something that exists at schools, and the possibility is whether we can use it at all schools. It's something that the stakeholders will also be commenting on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we took our last question from TTT. At this point in time, I would like to bring the press conference to a close. I thank you very much for attending this morning's press conference. The information provided has been very rich. If you have any additional questions, you can please submit them to the Corporate Communications Department, and we will forward them to the executive for response. That is it for today. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for the executive and for the members of the media for attending. Have a pleasant afternoon.